Hello and welcome to the Weather Studio Live. This week, broadcasting live as Storm Éowyn brings dangerous, disruptive and damaging winds to parts of the Republic of Ireland and the UK. We'll be bringing you all the latest on what's happened so far and what we can expect during the next 24 hours. I'm Aidan McGivern.
And I'm Alex Deakin. Yes, today's obviously an evolving story, so forgive us if things are a little bit chaotic today. It's been a busy morning, as you can imagine, and things are developing as we see them as we're talking to you right now. So we'll try and give you as good an overview as we possibly can and all the very latest.
Yeah, and of course we're here to answer your questions. That's the beauty of doing these lives. We're here to provide more information about the conditions where you are, what you can expect, and how long it will last. So do send us your questions. We've had lots of questions in so far. This week's live will be a bit different to normal, of course. There'll be no quiz, but that just allows us to spend more time focusing on the storm and answering your questions.
Yes, we can still, we'll still go through everything as much as we can, but a slightly different tone to things because obviously it's a pretty serious weather situation out there. But we'll still be answering, as I say, all your questions. By not having a quiz, we can answer more of them. So that's why we're doing it that way this week. Hope that's okay with you. But let us know in the comments any questions at all, any feedback, anything that you want to know about weather or climate.
Good one from Carol C to kick us off. Why did this low form into a weather bomb? Those are her words. Of course, we tend to use explosive cyclogenesis because we're geeks. But you could call it a weather bomb if you like. It's the same thing.
It's a genuine meteorological term. Explosive cyclogenesis, weather bomb, they're kind of interchangeable, but just means a rapid deepener, basically. The criteria has got to drop 24 millibars, 24 hectopascals in 24 hours, and if it does that, it can be classed as explosive cyclogenesis, and that's certainly what we've seen with this storm. In fact,
52, wasn't it? 52 millibars deepening in 24 hours. You just need 24 millibars. It's done it by 52. And it happened because it was caught up by an incredibly powerful jet stream. That jet stream was the consequence. It was more than 250 mile per hour, wasn't it, over the Atlantic earlier in the week? And that was the result of this incredible temperature contrast that we were flagging the middle of last week that was taking place over North America. So the cold, intense cold wave that they saw in Canada and central and eastern parts of the US, which of course forced the presidential inauguration indoors, not something that often happens. Just shows how cold it was. That cold air then clashed with much warmer air around the subtropics, and that contrast provided the fuel for the powerful jet stream, which then provided the fuel for this rapid deepening phase that we saw over the last 24 hours.
A chain of events, if you will. The jet stream is fueled by not just the temperature, it's the temperature contrast. It's the difference between cold and warm. It's the gradient. A lot of meteorology is all about gradients. It's about how things change over space or time, not necessarily just the sheer value of them. So it's not just about how cold it was, it's about how cold it was compared to that tropical air, and it's that gradient that drives, that drove the jet stream to be so incredibly powerful. We've been talking about this for a week or so. You talked about it with Alex Burkill last week on the live. In this, talked about it in quite detail in the deep dive this week, which you can still view. There's lots of details in there about the jet stream as well. So there's loads of stuff that we've been talking about that whole chain of events over the past week.
And it's important because actually these storms, when they rapidly deepen, obviously they get a lower central pressure and you get an enhanced difference between high pressure and low pressure, so you get stronger winds. But very often these storms undergo their deepening phase further to the west of the UK before they reach our shores, then they start filling. What's made this one so dangerous is that it was deepening as it pushed into Ireland during the early hours of this morning, and then moved just to the north of Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland then breaking their January lowest mean sea level pressure record as that low passed just offshore Northern Ireland. So the deepest low pressure on record for Northern Ireland for January. And that's why we've seen such strong winds across Ireland and Northern Ireland so far. More to come for Scotland and Northern England, North Wales. So a summary of the wind speeds that we've seen, absolutely remarkable, particularly for the Republic of Ireland. 114 miles per hour, Mace Head, and that's Ireland's strongest wind gust ever recorded for any month, any location in Ireland. And then we saw the winds pick up in Northern Ireland, and during the last few hours we've seen a wind gust of 93 miles per hour. That was in Killowen. Yeah. And
7 o'clock, I think, this morning.
That's the strongest since the Boxing Day storm of 1998, so more than 25 years ago. But the winds are expected to increase further now as it moves into Scotland and Northern England.
Yeah, we'll have a look at it in a bit more detail at the board in just a moment. But yeah, there's some of the headline stats. It is a record-breaking storm, so the strongest wind recorded in the Republic of Ireland. Reports coming in that some of the wind gauges kind of stopped working in the Republic of Ireland as well, so the winds may have been stronger in some locations. People, once it's all calmed down, engineers will go and inspect and see if there's any stronger gusts recorded. But yeah, that looks like it's been the strongest wind gust ever recorded in the Republic of Ireland, and that wind gust in Killowen may well be breaking an individual record for that site as well. So there's other records that are being broken along with that pressure record too. So this is a really remarkable storm, and that's why we've got red warnings in place. You know, they don't issue them lightly, 1 or 2 a year generally speaking, but yeah, one for Northern Ireland and the one across central and southwest Scotland. It's been extended this morning actually to cover a bit more of southwest Scotland. So yeah, we'll talk about those warnings in a bit more detail in a moment as well. But yeah, thank you for your questions. Keep them coming in. Again, we'll look at what has happened in just a second.
Ken Brown's asked, if the 87 storm happened again, how much warning do you think you'd be able to give now?
And Nice Knack also asking about, is it on a par with the 87 storm? Well, yeah, Ken, interesting, hard to say how much hopefully we'd give a bit more notice than we did in 87, because that was kind of after the event, the whole Michael Fish thing. So yeah, I did a recent, a couple of years ago, did a kind of analysis with Ken here, Ken Milne, who's an expert in this kind of statistical data and looking at the probabilities, and the evidence there would be that we would have issued a red warning for 87 in advance, well in advance. We'd have certainly highlighted it a couple of days before, given what we know now. So it would have at least been a couple of days' notice. Probably would have been similar to this storm, as you'd flag it 3 or 4 days before, you'd give it a name, you'd start off with a yellow warning, but say there's the potential for it to escalate it to amber, and then a day or so before escalate it to red. We only go red when we're very sure that these things are that the damaging winds are going to happen. So you have to have that high confidence as well as the high damage. It's double. You need both for it to be a red warning. And yeah, so we'd probably have issued it the day before, but it's hard to say with retrospect. With Nice Knack's comment about, is it on a par with 87? Well, interestingly, there's a few similarities. Talk about Sting Jet in a moment, because there's potential for that. Strongest gust in 87?
120, was it?
115 miles an hour.
Oh, right.
So very similar, because we had 114 miles an hour in the west of the Republic of Ireland. So yeah, it is on a par, in fact. But in a different part of the world, so the dynamics are different. Every storm's different. One of the beauties of our job.
Yeah, and the thing with the 87 storm was its track meant that the strongest winds affected the channel, and a subtle difference in that track would have moved those strongest winds further south and nowhere near the impacts that we saw. And that's often the tricky thing with these lows. You tend to have a relatively narrow swathe of the really damaging and dangerous winds, and pinpointing exactly where that's going to occur is tricky, even if you have a good idea a week ahead that a powerful low is going to form. It's refining that, and that's why we start with a yellow that tends to be quite broad across the UK, 5 days ahead or so, and then we can pinpoint as we get close to the event the exact locations that track will bring the most powerful and damaging wind gusts.
Ashraf, is there still a red warning in Glasgow? Yes, as I said, the red warning actually, the area has been extended a little across southwest Scotland. The red in Glasgow is valid until 5 o'clock this afternoon. It goes up until 2 o'clock this afternoon in Northern Ireland, but that doesn't mean it's going to be plain sailing in Northern Ireland. There's still an amber warning in place across Northern Ireland until 9 o'clock, I believe, this evening. So yeah, just because the red goes doesn't mean that the problems will be over, because of course the very strong winds that are happening right now could have weakened structures. So the winds, although perhaps not as strong this afternoon, can still cause structural damage and still cause problems. But thanks for all your questions. Keep them coming in. Ross Johnston, what's the strongest wind gust in Scotland? Have we got that? The latest one? As I say, it's a developing situation. So
yeah, the strongest winds haven't occurred in Scotland just yet, but there has been a wind gust of 75 knots, which, just off the top of my head, is 86 miles per hour. And that was recorded in Dundrennan at 9 o'clock this morning. Just refresh my page here. This is a live situation.
Live and Honor, the wonderful Honor, who will be here next week, I think. She has just dropped something in the chat that was, Dundrennan, 86 miles an hour, 85 miles an hour. Aberdaron, the strongest gust from our wind gusts earlier that we published on Twitter.
That's been surpassed by Brisleywood in Northumberland. 83 knots, which is going to be mid-90s.
Yeah, it must be high 90s, 96.
96 miles per hour.
Miles an hour. Right, so
winds, well, let's go through the forecast winds, because they are now increasing across Scotland.
The wind's blowing my stool over, look at that, it's so strong here. Right, let's have a look at what's happened so far. This is obviously the satellite image from the past few days. Look at that beautiful swell. That is the storm. That is Storm Éowyn. This was earlier in the week, a little circulation there. That was a named storm that hit Iberia, bringing some heavy rain and some thunderstorms here. But actually you can see this is the developing situation. That big cloud head generated by the jet stream, and then look at that fully developed system as it approaches into the UK. Let's just focus in on the last few hours, because really comes from nowhere. That big cloud head, which, as Aidan said earlier, generated by the jet stream, and then look at that. Then you've got that spiral in there. That was at 4 o'clock yesterday afternoon, and it continued to intensify as it approached the Republic of Ireland. Look at that in there, and that in there potentially I say, is something called a sting jet, and that is where may well have caused those really strong gusts across western parts of the Republic of Ireland. So let's zoom in a little bit. Just going to play through that, because I could watch that all day. That developing situation as it spins its way up there. Absolutely incredible to see the power of Mother Nature from space as that storm system moves through, and that spiraling in there is the low itself. The low itself actually just cleared to the northwest of Donegal and is now up here in western parts of Scotland. So you may be sitting on the west coast of Scotland right now with 5 mile an hour winds in the middle of that storm as that low pressure moves through. But certainly the winds have been stronger and will continue to get stronger in western Scotland through the rest of the afternoon. But that little finger in there, in fact, let's look at it in the RGB. This is the different view from the satellite, the RGB, red, green, blue, because it highlights different layers, different things in different colours, and you can pick out that little feature in there, and that's potentially a sting jet, so called because it's kind of the sting in the tail. It looks a bit like a scorpion's tail. Now, it's really hard to say for sure whether it was a sting jet or not in real time. They're very complicated things, and it's not just a case of, it looks a bit like one, there was a strong gust. There probably was one, but it's really hard to identify them in real time. So all we can say at the moment is, it looks like there may well have been one, and it coincides with, that was at 5 o'clock in the morning, and the strongest wind gust was just in there. So that's why there's a high chance that it was. But you've got to analyse the whole system as a three-dimensional system. And sting jets are really complicated. They're basically a small swathe of very strong winds that are associated with these rapidly deepening areas of low pressure. So this is kind of a classic situation where you can see one, but it's very, very complicated. I've been looking on social media this morning. There's a guy called Simon Lee, and he's been posting a whole thread of papers around sting jets and what they are. I mean, obviously, I fully understand this graphic, but if you want to understand it for yourself, go and find out, search up Simon Lee on Blue Sky, because there's loads of papers in here about what they are. They're linked into the conveyor belts of warm and cold air, basically, and there's another kind of cross-sectional diagram of it, so just kind of give you an idea of what is involved. But basically the cold air sinks south from the conveyor belt, and as it comes southwards, the rain and the snow, and we get evaporative cooling, and that accelerates a pulse of strong winds down in the backside of the low pressure system. It doesn't last long, 2 or 3 hours, doesn't cover a huge area, maybe 30 miles or so, but that then moves through time, and it creates this really intense area of very strong winds. That's potentially what we saw today, and it's certainly what we saw from this storm back in '87. That's where the first kind of proper sting jet was kind of observed retrospectively, because they weren't even known about then. I think it was 2004 the first kind of idealistic model of sting jets came into play, but then the reanalysis of the '87 storm showed that that was a classic example of that. So I'd urge you to go and check out Simon Lee's post on Blue Sky if you want more information on sting jets, or you can check out the Met Office's evergreen post on sting jets, which I think Honor may be able to put in the chat now. So there's a little video on that. Don't watch it now, but you can watch it later, more on sting jets. But also, as I said, I'd urge you to go and check out if you want more information about the nitty gritty, because it is pretty complicated about what they are. But yes, potentially we have seen that across as this storm came through there. That little swirl in there. It doesn't last long, as I say. And now we are in a situation where we've got the system itself heading its way up across western parts of Scotland. Let's look at what the pressure was. 941 hectopascals. That was at midnight. If we skip forward just a few hours, 942. So it's reached its peak. The past few hours hasn't seen any deepening of that low pressure system, but it has developed, as we saw in the satellite picture through the course of last night. Probably reached its low, its minimum at that stage first thing this morning when it was 941. It stayed at 940 odd and is still around that, although it's filling slightly now. We look at the pressure at the moment. Yes, it's filling slightly. It has done over the past couple of hours, but it's still a very powerful system, and you can see the squeeze in the isobars there that have developed it. Why was it caused? Well, let's put the that's the jet stream. So the low's in here. There's the jet. Now the winds in the centre of the jet, not as strong as they were. We were talking 250 mile an hour winds in the centre of the jet earlier in the week, so it's weakened a little bit, but it's still very powerful. And it's not necessarily the power of the jet, it's where the jet changes. I talked earlier about how gradients are really important. It's the fact that the jet stream goes from 150 miles an hour here to much weaker here. It's that change in the jet stream, because this is a little jet streak and it's in this left exit area of the jet that the low pressures deepen further. Again, more on that in the deep dive that I talked about on Tuesday about left exit and right entrance reasons. But that is why we've seen the low pressure intensify in that zone, and why it's still intensifying until around about midnight. Then it becomes kind of disengaged from the jet, and now if we fast forward, the jet's kind of pushing to the south, and it's not really in that left exit anymore, so it's not intensifying anymore. What does all that mean for the winds? Well, let's look at the warnings. Zoom in a little bit, because the strongest winds may well be over now in Northern Ireland, certainly in the next hour, but the red warning is still in place here until 2 o'clock. The red warning was extended across southwest Scotland this morning. That is in place until 5 o'clock. In the red warning area, as we've seen, gusts of 80, 90 miles an hour, potentially gusts of 100 miles an hour in exposed areas, likely to cause further structural damage, likely to cause widespread travel disruption. Then we have the broader amber warning areas, and this one in particular across northern Scotland is valid until tomorrow morning, because the storm system moves up there. The strong winds remain here until tomorrow morning. Even though the red runs out further south, still an amber warning in these areas until 9 o'clock. Further south still, there's a yellow warning across the southeast. That is going to fizzle out, but there's still the potential for gusts causing a bit of disruption across other parts of England and Wales. But the main action is all up here. And what are those winds doing? He said, desperately searching for the winds. There they are. Well, this is the wind accumulation through the whole of today. So if we put the strongest winds on for today, the strongest gusts zooming in a little bit, what we're expecting is that we've seen those really damaging gusts already across Northern Ireland. We're expecting this little swathe in here to intensify right now and in the next few hours across southwest Scotland. And then further north, the winds will increase here through the rest of the day. So these are the peak winds over the course of 24 hours of Friday. Look at Saturday's winds.
Next button down, next layer down.
Oh, it's that one, isn't it? Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. There's Saturday's winds. Still across northern Scotland. Now they will be easing through the day, but still very windy across northern Scotland on Saturday morning. And then on Sunday, well, it gets calmer, the winds further north, but there is the potential for some strong winds across the south. So there's actually a yellow warning in place for that next weather system coming in across the south and the west, but more on that in a moment. The wind speeds, if we just take those across, these are how the winds are developing now. So we've seen those winds picking up, saying that swathe this morning across Northern Ireland, and then into western Scotland, that little zone in there again, just really angling through the central belt. So that's pretty much now for the next hour or two, ticking it forward. Then those strongest winds move a little bit further north through central Scotland. So still quite light winds across the far north of Scotland this afternoon. But then through, as the storm system heads up here, the strongest winds always in that southwestern quadrant, as we call it, that southwestern corner across northern Scotland. That's where the strongest winds will continue through the night. That's why that amber warning is in place until tomorrow morning. So yeah, it's still pretty lively out there. We're still expecting further 70, 80 mile an hour gusts, potentially 90 mile an hour gusts in that red warning zone across Scotland for at least the next few hours.
Yeah, and you showed how the winds are starting to peak across central and southwest Scotland. I've got some more numbers here. The island of Islay in southwest Scotland, Argyll and Bute, 89 mile per hour wind gust there on the 12 o'clock observation. 86 miles per hour as well in southwest Scotland, Machrihanish. And then Glasgow has recently had a gust of 70. Edinburgh, 67. So those winds, I think in Glasgow and Edinburgh, they'll continue to increase in the next hour or two. And then further south, well, I mentioned earlier, the strongest wind we've seen so far is in Northumberland. That was in Brisley Wood, and that's 96 miles an hour. And of course, we saw the wind peak at 92 miles an hour in Northern Ireland, in Killowen, and that is the strongest wind they've had in Northern Ireland since 1998. So the winds are continuing to pick up in Scotland, hopefully now starting to ease in Northern Ireland. We also had a question, what's the lowest pressure recorded in this storm? And I've got a few numbers for you. So Storm Éowyn attained a minimum pressure of 938 hectopascals just to the northwest of Ireland at 2 a.m. But for Northern Ireland, it was the lowest mean sea level pressure for January, at least since 1900, and that was 949 hectopascals. Obviously, as that storm moved through, its central pressure, the lowest central pressure was just offshore, but there was a station that picked up, Magilligan picked up that central pressure of 949 hectopascals. And yeah, I'm sure that in the days coming, there might be a further analysis of what the numbers
all of these
been.
figures are provisional. You know, to the Met Office and Met Eireann will be checking all of the figures that we do with this. There'll be an analysis of the storm. That's something we do. We'll be looking at the warnings, how useful they were, you know, and how timely they were. So there'll be a whole reanalysis of this storm once it's happened. That's what we always do, particularly with named storms or any significant weather event. So yeah, all of these numbers will need to be checked and verified before they're finalised. But these are the kind of living and breathing numbers as we're going through the storm right now.
And who was it? Ross Johnston. Do you have any tips to stay safe?
Well, there's lots of tips, lots of really good advice on the Met Office website. I mean, the main advice, if you are in the red warning areas, is to stay at home, is to really hunker down. This is serious winds. We've been talking about historic winds, record-breaking winds. So the main advice in the red warning areas is please don't go out. It is dangerous to do so. There's a danger to life. Amber warning area, the advice in there is only go out if you absolutely have to. If you're in the yellow warning areas, then just be sensible about it. Think about how it's affecting you, and again, can you delay your journey, that kind of thing. So that's the main bit of advice. Other advice, it's probably a bit late now, but if be prepared for power cuts is one of the key factors. We've seen them already across Northern Ireland, tens of thousands without power. So just be prepared for a power cut. Know where have a torch handy. Make sure your phone is charged. If you need medicines, make sure you've got access to them. So make sure you can get around if all the lights go out. Yeah, okay, power cut during the day, you can still probably see around, but it's going to get dark pretty quickly. So make sure you've got access to all the things that you need if you get a power cut, particularly with big storms like that. As I said, tens of thousands without power. They're not going to all be turned back on instantaneously. Could be many hours, possibly even days before some power is restored. Remember the Storm Éowyn, was it, where hit the east of Scotland a couple of years ago, and it because of the remoteness of some of the power lines, took quite a few days for power to be restored. So that can happen. So again, just be prepared for that. Make sure you've got a pack ready. The preparations in advance, as we've been talking about all this week. If you follow the Met Office, that's probably the best bit of advice I can give you, because we'll give you the heads up when these storms are coming, and then you can do things like, make sure everything's secure outside, put your garden furniture away, that kind of thing is the best advice.
Yeah, our weather warnings, when we issue them, they're based on impacts and on likelihood of those impacts happening, and then you can find advice when you click into the weather warnings on the web page, and you can find advice on what to do. And there's a handy explainer if you're a little bit confused about how our weather warnings work and want to find out more. There's an explainer that's just been uploaded to our YouTube channel on weather warnings.
Our warnings give valuable advice on staying safe in different weather conditions. But have you ever wondered how we decide when to issue a weather warning, and how we decide what colour to use? Let's explore this and what it means for you. We'll also cover what actions you can take if a warning is issued, and how to ensure you don't miss an alert for your area.
Really good stuff, that, actually. That's a really good explainer. We get a lot of questions asked about it, particularly this week, with the difference between Met Eireann's warning and the UK Met Office warnings, because there is a difference the way we do them. So it's a really good explainer explaining the whole matrix, and it's not just based on the wind speeds. It has to be based on the impacts that we're likely to see, but also how confident we are in those weather forecasts. So it's a really good explainer there that Alex has made.
Yeah. A few more questions. Are extratropical cyclones generally weaker than tropical cyclones? Good question. And there have been a lot of questions about whether this was a hurricane because of the extraordinary wind speeds.
Hurricane strength winds, for sure, but it's not a hurricane, no. And hurricanes and tropical cyclones are formed in a different way. So it's about how they're formed, and they're a different shape, they're different orientation, they're different, the strongest winds are not always in the same place. I talked about this storm and low pressure systems that we see. The strongest winds are in that southwestern quadrant between 6 and 9 o'clock. If you think of it as a clock face, that's where the strongest winds are. With a hurricane, they're very different. They're further out from the center, and they're more symmetrical, for the word I'm looking for. So yeah, they're very different. Hurricanes are fueled by warm seas. The sea has to be above 26 degrees Celsius. That's where they form. Whereas, as we've seen, it's the jet stream, the winds high in the sky, that tend to develop the low pressure systems that we see. So it's the way that they're formed, and then the way they interact is very different. And that's why hurricanes tend to fizzle out as soon as they hit land, because they lose their power source. So it would be incorrect to call this a hurricane, but you can say it's got hurricane force winds. Also, the term tropical cyclones and extratropical cyclones, that's basically just the location of areas of low pressure. So you can have tropical cyclones, they're in the tropics. Extratropical cyclones, they're in the mid-latitudes. Tropical cyclones will cover anything from tropical depressions, which are relatively weak features, through to tropical storms, where you get much more strong winds, through to hurricanes, typhoons, and so on. Different parts of the world have different names for them. And then you get very, very damaging winds. But tropical cyclones aren't always hurricanes. They can be weaker systems, similar in magnitude and strength to those that we get. And then we can, on occasion, get extratropical cyclones that have hurricane force winds, even if they're not technically hurricanes. Hope that's explained it all.
I did a video on this as well. There's loads in our back catalogue you can spend all weekend catching up on.
Tropical cyclones.
That video.
We'll see if Honor can find that and put that in the chat. So we're making Honor work for her money today, aren't we? Thank you for that, Honor, for putting everything in the chat that we've been asking and talking about. Yes, that weather warnings video is in there as well. So yeah, loads of stuff you can catch up on this weekend.
Andy Shaw, UK weather, is there a clear trend in terms of the number of extreme weather events that are occurring? Are there more now than they were historically?
Well, extreme weather events in general, yes. I mean, our weather is getting more extreme. So in terms of temperature and rainfall in particular, we are seeing more extreme weather events, not just in the UK, but globally. And that's just because our world is warming. That's completely consistent with what we expect with climate change. A warmer atmosphere holds more moisture, so when it rains harder. So we're seeing more extremes of rainfall, we're seeing more extremes of temperature, and yeah, that is likely to continue. It's hard to say about windstorms. It's hard to pin down the detail of windstorms. We don't see many of them, or enough of them to statistically see any significant trends. And the models, the climate models, struggle to resolve them, struggle to pick them out. So again, there's no strong trend in climate predictions about whether we'll see more or fewer windstorms. But our weather is becoming more extreme. When these storms do arrive, they're going to bring more rain with them. So there's a greater chance of flooding because of climate change. But whether we see more or fewer in terms of the wind strength, you can't say really, because we don't see many of them.
Yeah, and they happen so varied. Through interannual variability is very high with windstorms. You know, we've had a very stormy season this season. Last season, very stormy. Season before, not really stormy at all. The first storms in that season happened in the summer, didn't they?
Yeah. This time last year we were up to Henk. So we were up to H, so we were already two beyond this year. I mean, this year feels stormy, but I'd say it's only slightly above average. But yeah, last year we were up to Henk. A couple of years before, as Aidan said, we didn't see any. So there's such a big variability, but that's to do with climate drivers. Things like El Nino, La Nina play a part. So yeah, you're just going to get a natural variation anyway. And we've only been naming storms since 2015. So, you know, you can't really draw much information on a 10-year data when you're only seeing a handful every year. So there's not enough statistical data to have a clear analysis on that. And as I said, most climate models won't give you much beyond that anyway, because they're pretty infrequent.
Jack Angels said, my neighbour on the right has lost his whole 6-foot fence. And the neighbour on the left has lost his shed, greenhouse and part of the roof of his conservatory, plus guttering. Wow.
Oh dear, that's nasty. Yeah.
Take it you're unscathed, Jack.
Yeah.
Maybe you were a follower of the YouTube Met Office and took precautions.
Yes, that's
well
it. We'll take the win.
Actually, as someone's asked how closely the Met Office collaborate with Met Eireann, and on a similar note, people are asking about the Isle of Man and why we don't include warnings for the Isle of Man.
Yeah, Ruari Ahern asking about the relationship with Met Eireann. Yeah, very close relationship with Met Eireann. We name storms with them. It's us, Met Eireann, and the Dutch Weather Service, KNMI. We work together with the storms. Between the three of us, we choose the names, and then we decide when a storm is named as well. So yeah, we work very closely with Met Eireann. They have a different criteria for the way they issue their warnings, so that's why there was a disparity earlier in the week. Between we were still amber across Northern Ireland, whereas the rest of but that's because of the different way that they name them. The wind speeds were consistent. We don't kind of overlap because otherwise you could potentially then get inconsistencies. As for the Isle of Man, they have their own weather service, so they look after themselves. They're governed by themselves. So again, if we were to issue warnings, but their government weren't issuing warnings, it would create confusion. So they have their own operating system, and we have ours. So we don't.
We get a lot of questions about why we don't talk more about Ireland in our forecasts, or in this case, the Isle of Man. And the fact is that we don't want to tread on the toes of other Met agencies. We don't want to be saying things that maybe are inconsistent with those Met services. So yeah, the best advice is to follow the advice of your local Met service. And feel free to enjoy our YouTube channel for the bigger picture and the overview of what's happening in the UK, across Europe and the world. But yeah,
we've got enough to cover with the UK. We can't be covering everything else as well all the times. Lana Van Ruin, hi guys. Maybe this is a question we've had before. Is there a chance we could get tornadoes with this weather formation? Well, interesting. Tornadoes have been in the news this week. Toro are an organisation that just look for severe storms, convection, thunderstorms, and particularly tornadoes. And they put out a warning yesterday for tornadoes that was picked up by various media outlets. Now, the Met Office don't deal with we don't do tornado warnings, basically. We warn for thunderstorms, we warn for lightning. The UK gets 30, 40 tornadoes a year. Most of them don't cause too many issues, but obviously any tornado that hits a building, potentially very damaging. But the chances of a tornado in any one location are so small, it's really hard to issue warnings for them. We don't issue warnings for tornadoes. But Toro are a different organisation. They did put that warning out yesterday. Weather front was moving through that made the atmosphere particularly volatile. This system we're seeing today, Storm Éowyn, isn't likely to cause tornadoes. Never say never, of course, but it's not the same beast. The atmosphere is in a completely different shape. It's not as unstable, so unlikely. But then tomorrow, there's another weather front coming through tomorrow afternoon, a trough, which is quite unstable again. Actually has similar traits to the one we saw yesterday, which could generate some strong convection, and that has a greater chance of seeing some tornadoes. So unlikely. Today, in today's weather system, it's not the same beast. But yeah, we don't issue tornado warnings, so every time you see that in the newspapers, just be wary of it. There's more information about Toro. You can search them up as you like through Google.
Let's see. There have been a few questions about what we can expect through the weekend. So should we cover that?
Yes, I'll try and not fall off the chair this time. There we go. That's better.
Smooth.
Smooth. Very smooth. Okay, so we've talked about today. There's Storm Éowyn moving away. There's a dip in the jet stream, and there's a little funky low pressure system, and it's that weather front is actually more of a trough that may well generate some lively showers tomorrow afternoon. But for most places across the UK, this is Saturday lunchtime. Look at that. It's a fine looking day. The wind's relatively light, still a bit breezy across Scotland, and still the potential for some very strong gusts in the morning across the far north of Scotland. But for a good chunk of England and Wales, the winds will be light tomorrow. It'll be a fine winter's day with some sunshine. Temperatures, well, 6, 7, maybe 8 Celsius, so about average for the middle part of January. So a good looking winter's day for your Saturday tomorrow. Decent day to enjoy the sunshine if you get it. Through the day though, we are going to look at that band, that weather front moving through. And I say that could be quite active. It'll suddenly spark some heavy rain. We could see some lively gusts of wind with that as well. We've got a wind shear there, changing the wind direction. So suddenly the winds will whip up, and the potential for some thundery showers on that as that moves through. So that's Saturday evening into where, so it crosses Northern Ireland with some heavy showers in the afternoon. Then it crosses into other parts of England. Well, a bit of snow in the hills as well before it kind of fizzles out as it crosses the southeast. But let's take the 4 up off, look at the bigger picture as we zoom out a little bit for Sunday, because down here, look at that, there's another area of low pressure coming in, another band of wet and windy weather swinging up from the southwest. Again, there's the jet. Now the jet's wriggled and swiggled around, it's broken up, but here, if you look, it's kind of another left exit. So it's another kind of jet streak here, and you've got that left exit again, which is why this low is spinning up. Now this one is intensifying, not as intense as before. Let's take that pressure off. If I do that and do that, then that number should disappear. Not as intense. And crucially, as Aidan mentioned earlier, this one's spinning up further away from the UK. So it is intensifying out here, but by the time it gets close to the UK, it's kind of separating from the jet. So it's not intensifying as much. Still a deep area of low pressure, 957 hectopascals, still a lot of isobars spewing out of it, but a different beast, not as powerful. However, still potentially going to cause some problems as we go through into the weekend, as that low approaches and those weather fronts kind of move towards the UK. So that is a spell of wet and windy weather. That low itself then kind of hangs around. Let's take that number off because it's annoying me. We don't need that on. That low kind of, again, it's disengaged now from the jet stream, but it kind of still is in there. And then there's a little ripple in the jet here. Look at that little weakness in the isobars there. Just the potential on Sunday night for that to spin up into an area of low pressure. The models aren't really agreeing on that. Not surprising because it's quite a small little scale feature coming in here, but the potential for some more rain and another little low to develop in there. So we could see further areas of low pressure just squinting across the south. And that could make a big difference to how much rainfall we see. And take that off. So this is Sunday. There's that rain sweeping in across the southwest. The wind's also picking up as well. Again, not as intense, not as strong, but the potential, particularly because we've had a stormy spell, today's winds may have weakened structures, may have weakened branches. So, gusts of 50, 60 miles an hour, which you may see coming in on Sunday, could cause some further issues and some further disruption. So we do have warnings in place for rain and for wind on Sunday. This is the wind one. And this is the rain one in here, because that heavy rain, again, because we've seen a lot of rain recently, there'll be some squally showers moving through on Saturday, could cause some flooding issues. So we do have warnings in place for Sunday for wind and rain. Beyond that, into next week, that low kind of hangs around. There's that little low forming potentially. That needs to watch that, because that could, if that does spin up, that will drop a lot more rain across the southwest. So that's why the yellow rain warning runs until Monday. Then into next week, the jet kind of dives down here. We've still got this low in place. It remains very unsettled, but there are signs of the weather calming down back end of next week. High pressure moving in, but certainly pretty disturbed with low pressure dominating, further spells of wet and windy weather with more showers to come in as we go through into the week. And that's shown here by the probability distribution of the different flavours of weather. Again, more information on this on a deep dive that Aidan did a couple of weeks ago with Rob Neal, who devised this system. So it's the first time you've done that. If it's the first time you've seen this, then basically click on here. Oh, it's not
Use
working.
your finger.
There we go. Use my finger, not my pen. It shows the type of weather flavour that we're likely to see. These dark blues dominating 100% even into next week. And by the middle of the week, it's between the dark blue and the light blue, but they're both showing unsettled weather with low pressure nearby. That slightly lighter blue would indicate more northerly winds, which could bring a bit of a chill. It's not until the back end of next week when these yellows start to come in, and they are indicative of higher pressure. So there's a greater chance through next week that higher pressure across the south may start to build in. It's a long way off, best part of a week, but that is the most likely trend through the back end of next week and the following weekend. So yes, pretty unsettled, more spells of wet and windy weather first half of next week, but potentially, certainly across the south, turning a bit drier and a bit calmer through the second half of next week.
Loads and loads of comments coming in. Too many to keep up with, I'm afraid. I'm sorry about that. Can't answer all your questions. Don't forget, you can still add a comment if you're watching this after we're live, because of course many people will be watching this after the live. You can add a comment and we'll try and address some of those in next week's live, or answer them directly on our YouTube comment section. And don't forget to give us a thumbs up, hit subscribe. Doing those things will only encourage us to do more of this sort of thing. So please do that if you appreciate what you're seeing today.
Something else we've posted recently?
Yeah, climate conversations, and it's on sustainability goals. So if you're interested in that, here's a little preview.
I don't think we've got a preview of this one. It's just a suggestion that you can press the button.
It's there.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, look,
there you go.
That way. No, I'm doing there.
There it is.
That's what people do when they go in front of the green screen the
Yeah.
first time. They get their hands the wrong way around. Now I know what it feels like.
We should be better at that. We should be better at that. We've had a bit of experience of that. So yes, something else for you to watch this weekend, climate conversations. Thank you so much for all your comments. Thanks for watching. Sorry it's been a bit hectic today, but as you can surely imagine, it's a really busy day. Lots of people to thank, actually. I think before we go, Greg and Rich, who are next door pressing all the buttons. Greg in particular, he was involved in making that weather warnings video and the climate conversation. So he's had a busy week posting those. Rich has been involved in the questions. So big thanks, big shout out to those guys. Also to Honor, who has been putting everything in the chat. She will be here next week. I think it's Honor and Alex B doing the live next week. Also, I want a big shout out to everyone in the operations centre. So, you know, this is a full-on operation here at the Met Office when we have these storms. We've been talking about it all week, but you and I are here through the day, but there's guys upstairs working 24 hours. It's a 24-hour shift pattern. So, you know, people here at the Met Office constantly looking at the weather. So the chief meteorologist, the deputy chief meteorologist, people communicating with the emergency services and all the agencies out and about. So there's lots of people here at the Met Office who have worked their socks off throughout this week and will continue to do so as we monitor the weather situation. So, yeah, lots of people to thank for all the efforts we've done, because we've had over 1 million views on YouTube. You were looking at the stats earlier, haven't we? Over 1 million views this week on YouTube. So big thank you to that, but it's a big operation. It takes lots of people to make this work. And if you can share the love, let people know that we're on here, that would be great. Let more people see. And yeah, hit that thumbs up button, because that is a big boost for us.
Ultimately, the point of all this, the guys upstairs in the operations centre are doing day in, day out, night in, night out. And what we're doing here with communicating it is just to keep people safe, and we want to reach as many people as possible with our forecasts and our warnings to ensure that people stay safe in these kinds of situations. So yeah, it's great that there are lots of people engaged with this and changing plans and sitting at home watching this rather than
being
going
out and about.
Yeah.
Yes, that's a good point. That's a good point.
So thank you for joining us today, and don't forget to continue to follow us for all the very latest. We'll be back again very soon.
Yeah, stay safe.